Anatoly, good morning or good evening your time. How are you doing? Good morning from Hong Kong.
It's evening in San Francisco, but really great to be here.
Awesome.
Perfect.
And so well, it's so great to have you. This is so for everyone on the call. This is the second in our series of interviewing portfolio companies, and we're very excited to have Anatoly with us today. So Anatoly is the CEO and founder of Solana. So Solana is a layer one smart contract platform. It's a very exciting project, and there's been a lot of news recently with the new token bridge with Ethereum, project Serum, which is a collaboration with a leading exchange. So I think lots to talk about today.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm really excited to be here. You guys were like one of our earliest supporters, so and have always been like super helpful. So
Yeah.
awesome to talk to you again. I wish we could do it live
Perfect.
one of these days.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you for taking the time to actually speak with us and our LPs. Actually, these are the people who are behind CMCC. We have people now dialing in from mainly from Asia, but also from Australia, from North America, from actually all sorts of parts of the world. And so we first met the team of Solana back in, I think, end of 2017 when Raj, your COO, came to Hong Kong, came to our office, and we got to know each other. We were impressed by the team and specifically by the unique approach that you had to scaling a layer one blockchain. And we supported the team since. But let's jump right into it. And why don't we start with a quick 2 minutes kind of elevator type of pitch introduction to what Solana is, and later we go deeper into things.
Sure. So Solana is a high performance layer one. It's open, permissionless, censorship resistant, just like Ethereum, but 1,000 times faster. And we achieved that performance improvement mostly through traditional optimization techniques, horizontal scaling, kind of low latency messaging. But we do have like one fundamental breakthrough, which is this idea of tracking time as it's passing in the network using a cryptographic technique called the verifiable delay function. And that's kind of our secret sauce. And we're still, I think, the only layer one that's doing this. And we've been live since March, and it's live and proven now because kind of one of the most key and hardest projects to decentralize is the full functionality of an exchange. A fully decentralized, open permissionless central limit order book is running on Solana, and that's Project Serum. And I think they've hit they're about to hit 100 million total volume. They had like a 10 million day recently, so it's growing pretty quickly, and that's been running for about a month and a half.
Let's start with the team. The Solana team has a lot of experience in coming from distributed computing companies like Qualcomm, Dropbox, Google, and so forth. Can you tell us a little bit more about the team, the background of the team, and also what brought you together and how you actually got together to kick this project off?
Yeah, so myself, I've been at Qualcomm from 2003 to 2015, and that's where I really matured as an engineer, and I was primarily focused on performance optimizations really from day one. Things like push to talk to advanced like augmented reality, and things like that. And throughout my career, I had like made a lot of good friends. And when I had this idea to build Solana, I was lucky enough that they joined. Right, this was kind of a big step for senior folks, principal engineers, senior directors of technology, like that level of people to kind of take a jump and join Solana. So to give you an idea, like Rob, our first hire, he was my boss on Brew, which is an operating system that Qualcomm built that had 500 million devices. And I was really there on that project with him from almost day one. We kind of built this thing from scratch. Best operating system designer that I've ever worked with. He was a senior director of technologies when he joined Solana. Another, like our second hire, Michael Vines, which was Greg, like one of the co-founders, his boss, who built Firefox OS, amongst other things, really like a platforms kind of person. And he's been driving kind of the platform side for us. Some of the folks that joined worked on the LTE standard, so like we have like a pretty deep team of technologists like that are more based in the traditional kind of operating systems, mobile, hardware based kind of thinking than our competitors that are coming from more crypto or, kind of academic distributed systems. So I think we bring kind of this kind of decades of experience building systems that, you know, have state actors that try to break into them, you know, like protocols that have to serve 1 billion people concurrently. Those kinds of things, like we've had to kind of consider when working at Qualcomm.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, I think, you know, we've always really loved the kind of how deep into the technology you guys are and your experience in distributed systems. And so maybe if we can like really dive in now, to kind of set the scene, I thought it might be helpful for the people watching to understand the idea of the scalability trilemma. And so just to explain that for people here. So basically, base layer blockchains have this scaling challenge, which is that there's kind of a trade-off between 3 different things. So you have scalability, which is, you know, how many transactions per second you can put through the network. You have decentralization, which I guess is loosely the number of participants running the network. And then you have security, which is, you know, how easily can an attacker kind of compromise the network. And so, you know, so blockchains, the idea there is that a blockchain can have 2 of those things, but having 3 is very difficult. So, you know, you could be very secure and very decentralized like Bitcoin, but the result of that is it's a very slow network. Or you could be, you know, very, you could be kind of secure and also very scalable, but you wouldn't be very decentralized. No, it would be a pretty centralized group of nodes running it. And so I think, you know, with that kind of framework in mind, it seems to me that Solana is getting there in terms of basically kind of solving this challenge. So,
Yep.
So maybe we can kind of dive into how Solana works and how it does that.
Yeah, so to kind of like, I always think of this in like computer science terms. I mean, this trilemma is more of a question of like cap theorem, or even goes back to like Shannon-Hartley theorem of how much information can we propagate through a channel. And if you guys remember, like, you know, your radio protocol classes, you know, the kind of this fundamental problem is if you have 2 radio towers that transmit over this at the same time over the same frequency, you get noise. And the first protocol people built was they gave each tower a clock and it would alternate by time. And this clock is outside of consensus, right? It's a centralized kind of like point of reference that these towers trust. They're able to make this assumption and propagate more information through the network. And this is the same problem in blockchain. And there were radio protocols that use similar techniques to blockchain, where nodes would transmit at random over the same frequency and then try to back off. And you get these kind of slow performing networks. And a lot of the folks in the space have been focusing on trying to kind of optimize this random block emitter. This, like, you know, imagine if us having this conversation, we decided who gets to talk randomly, right? And if both of us talk at the same time, we have this awkward pause and decide who's talking next. That is effectively Bitcoin. And that works fine for like a small number of nodes. But if you try to increase this to a very large set, it kind of becomes intractable. And this is why Bitcoin has this 10-minute kind of difficulty adjustment between blocks. It's to allow for folks to have a chance to be the only block producer in the network in the entire world. So this is a network that covers the entire globe, and this 10-minute kind of number comes from this, you know, parameter that is not super optimized for Bitcoin, but is incredibly optimized for Ethereum, which is around 12 seconds. So the kind of, you know, you can't really solve a computer science problem. You get lucky with a solution. So 2017, I got very lucky with the solution to this. Is I kind of had this realization that you can use same cryptographic technique that Bitcoin does, but instead of tracking energy or electricity, you can track the amount of time that somebody spends generating this cryptographic data. And that was enough for me to construct a clock similar to how radio protocols constructed this clock in the super early days, that they can use as a point of reference to really optimize how many of them can talk at the same time. So if you look at our Explorer right now, our block times are running at about 350 milliseconds, which is basically like unheard of, right, in the space. And this is why when you go to like DEX project Serum.com, from a user's perspective, those orders are updated as fast as they're on Binance. So that is like, I think, like real proof of us kind of hitting this not only like proving the technology, but hitting product market fit with that technology.
Yeah. Maybe just kind of going back to the trilemma then, in terms of the level of decentralization that you guys have, can we talk a little bit about maybe your validator set?
Yeah, so our mainnet right now, like we started with 40 validators in March, and it's I think right now deployed is close to 200. So we've been doubling pretty quickly, and we have this kind of pipeline to onboard new validators on our testnet called TDS, and that's near 500. So those folks they put up their systems, they test their servers, and we give them a grant if they do this for a month to then move over to mainnet. So our network is growing pretty quickly. I think the trilemma comes in this idea that if you increase the set to such a large number in these traditional systems, that they simply can't communicate with each other because of this random emitter, right? If we have a single chat with 500 people that all try to talk at the same time, we kind of overstep each other. But that's fundamentally based on this random producer and this communication protocol that forces people to wait and delay. If you have something like this, the oldest protocol in the book and radio is called time division multiple access. 2G networks were able to scale to much larger numbers than we see in crypto today. And this is effectively what we implemented, is time division multiple access, but in a trustless, permissionless way. And that's been very successful in terms of maintaining performance and scalability and decentralization. So in that sense, we have kind of optimized the trilemma to, I think, its logical conclusion. And it doesn't really violate the trilemma, because fundamentally what the trilemma really talks about is increasing the throughput of the network greater than the bandwidth of any of the validators. Mm-hmm. So within that requirement that our throughput is still bound by the bandwidth of the local nodes, we are very high performance. And that's actually good enough, because modern day bandwidth is much, much faster than Ethereum. Like 1 gigabit networks to everybody's home in the world is kind of like a rapid reality. And a 1 gigabit network can handle, 500,000 transactions per second. It's just like that's the amount of data it takes, and the costs are astronomically small. The real costs to running these networks are egress bandwidth costs. It's about $50 a terabyte, globally, and that comes out to 1 million transactions for $10. So that's really like what people should be pricing these things out.
Yeah. Do you foresee a kind of a future where you have kind of tens of thousands of nodes, of validators, or do you think that's
No, that is actually what we're driving at, because I think the space has an opportunity to break out and actually be the financial fabric for the rest of the world. And for that to be true, the security of the system has to be infallible. Like a CSO at Visa, like a chief security officer at like a major financial institution, needs to look at the network and have kind of a strongest guarantee possible that it's never gonna kind of steal their customers' funds before they use it. And for that to be true, the numbers of validators, you can think of, at the end of the day, it can kind of break these systems down to something as simple as a multi-sig wallet, right? If you have 21 participants in a multi-sig, it's somewhat secure, but if you have 10,000, it's much, much more secure. So for somebody at Visa, for them to really trust this network as this massive multi-sig, when we get to these numbers that are like 10,000, 20,000, they'll feel that, I think that we can make a really strong argument that it's impossible to build a more secure system. And I think, while I don't know if that's a requirement for them to switch, we need to be on the way there, right? Like we need to be, as a network, and I think as the space, to be rapidly approaching that reality as like a real thing, a real concrete reality for us to start adopting bigger financial institutions and larger volumes.
Yeah, and maybe just taking that to like its real logical conclusion of like everyone having a light client on their phone, so everyone can basically validate their own transactions. Do you think, is that realistic, or does that kind of start pushing against then your scalability?
So that is like kind of a different approach to trying to solve this problem. If you have 1 million devices that are participating for short amounts of time and verifying parts of the chain at different moments, that is, I think, is still a unsolved computer science problem. Like, we haven't seen any real demonstrations of this at a large scale. I mean, I would be really excited to see something like this go live, but like when you look at Coda or ETH2 or any of those experiments, their numbers are no different than our system, right? And they're taking, to achieve like those goals, are taking compromises and splitting the state and partial verification of the chain. The difference with Solana is that we're betting on hardware becoming cheap enough to where we have, 10, 20,000 validators, and maybe these are not a validator on every phone, but these are validators in, everyone that is trading on Serum, right? Like everybody that is running like a, that is like an active trader, right? There's 100,000 active traders in FTX. If each one of them ran a machine, that is a very massive and decentralized network. And the reason they would do so is because maybe they want lowest latency, fastest access to the actual, trades and things like that. So like that kind of decentralization comes from adoption. So like for us, focusing on just sheer validator numbers is almost kind of like missing the point. If we actually have strong adoption, then this will come naturally,
Yeah, no, for sure. Maybe kind of turning a little bit, maybe just to the token. So Sol is the token that runs on Solana. Could you just tell us a little bit about what that is and why it's necessary in the network?
Yeah, so it's a pretty straightforward token for a proof of stake network. There's nothing kind of gimmicky or no like kind of fancy mechanism. So in terms of the reason why it's there is for Sybil resistance. So proof of stake networks need some way to prevent the network from being spammed, and Sol is that token. So it pays for fees in terms of using up bandwidth and as well as memory and state. So like a Serum DEX has a market that's 1 megabyte or something like that, and that requires some Sol to maintain it, as well as every trade that's put into the system, or every offer to every bid or ask, every message is effectively pays some Sol. So staking and those rewards are very similar to Cosmos. There's staking is a mechanism to ensure security of the network. It kind of puts capital at risk, right? And slashing is that risk. If validators misbehave, they can get slashed. So slashing is not implemented yet. That's kind of a slow rollout because of the, staking and inflation of themselves are very kind of like, making a mistake there is catastrophic. So that's coming online really quickly, but slashing is even, another vector of attack. So that's also being implemented probably in the next 6 months.
Yeah. So also, we've been mentioning a few different projects as we've been talking. I wonder, do you see kind of like, how do you see Solana differentiating itself from competitors? Because obviously, right now it's fair to say Ethereum, has the majority developer mind share. How do you see yourself stacking up against different projects? And then also, do you foresee a future, like a multi-chain future, or do you think a lot of attention will kind of congregate around one or two protocols?
There's some, I guess, I'll try to answer the last question first. Like in terms of a multi-chain future, I think the design space is somewhat Pareto efficient. The kind of censorship resistance we're building is the censorship resistance of a message in the current moment. So imagine, you have Binance and Coinbase are connected to over some financial network, and if that's Ethereum, the 3 miners that make up 51% of the Ethereum network can decide which hedge fund gets their USDT into Binance first. Yeah. So that is a level of censorship that is very that Ethereum is not set up for that kind of censorship resistance. What Ethereum is set up is for a very long kind of like proof of work based security, which guarantees that eventually the heaviest chain will win. The way we're built Solana is to maximize the set of people that could potentially order these transactions. And that is, to my mind, like we've been focusing on censorship resistance for price discovery. And that is different from this kind of like proof of work style censorship resistance. So the use case we're kind of really targeting is, DEXs, kind of any kind of financial instruments. Like we just, there's like a Uniswap that Project Serum just launched. that has had like, like I think 10 times more trades per day than what you see in Ethereum, simply because it's faster and cheaper to use. So like, so from that perspective, like it's Pareto efficient, like our design, but it's obviously different than something like Arweave, which is a data storage layer. So there's obviously like different use cases for different chains. My view is that if you kind of don't have the Bitcoin store value proof of work in a smart contract layer, what you have is price discovery. That's the main use case, because the state and the programs that are executing on these machines are financial instruments, and you need the largest capacity to be able to trade those and the most amount of censorship resistance to ensure that everybody gets a fair price. So to me, this is kind of fundamental. So this is why we've been really focused on this use case from day one. I don't know if you guys remember my first pitch deck. It literally said Solana blockchain at NASDAQ speed. This is kind of how we've been thinking about this problem for a long time.
I think, wasn't it very early on you were originally thinking of just being a DEX?
This was the main use case that we were working on, but the DEX part was always, I'm an operating systems engineer. I couldn't just build you a product. I have to build an operating system. So
yeah. Also, so maybe just kind of just to reformulate a little bit for everyone. So one of the kind of the key things about Solana is this ordering of transactions, and this is the challenge with something like Ethereum. Is inside a block, there is basically the ordering of transactions is defined by the miner, and that's kind of broadly correct?
Yeah, so that's broadly correct about Solana. We are much more resistant to that kind of reordering because of our kind of hard assumptions about time and consensus, and our ability to schedule more block producers to decide that order as fast as possible. So in a single Ethereum block, which is about 12 seconds, that's I think close to 30 Solana block producers could actually like encode transactions. So this problem isn't solvable, but it can effectively be marginalized because we can increase the number of block producers, and we can use some cryptographic tricks to ensure that the amount of effort that a block producer would need to create that kind of censorship would be catastrophic to them.
Should we talk a bit about use cases?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Anatoly, you were recently announcing a token bridge with Ethereum. That was actually quite interesting in collaboration actually with Certus One, or friends of ours in Berlin. Can you tell us a little bit what this token bridge is for, and what specifically for our LPs who are not so technical, why would such a token bridge make sense, and what's used?
So in a lot of ways, like you can think of bridges as like kind of agreements between exchanges to like move orders or to move funds between them. Like, traditional New York Stock Exchange and the CME, or there's ways to they effectively have paper agreements and kind of handshakes and a bunch of documents to move funds between those two systems. The cool thing about cryptography and these open financial networks is that we can write code that would allow assets that are settled on Ethereum to move into Solana and vice versa. So this is what these bridges are for. They're effectively kind of like, you can think of software eating the world as us building software to create these agreements with some cryptographic guarantees to allow funds to move between these networks with some kind of assumptions about trust and settlement guarantees. And like I can't, like, it's hard to like give very hard like
that's getting more and more into our view of, and it's getting more and more into the direction of actually chains interoperating with each other, I would say, in the future, right? And being able to have another chain as a fallback option, or simply to interact, right? And so what else are users able to do today on Serum? Sorry, not Serum. Well, Serum is one case. Perhaps we dive deep into Serum also. Let's dive into Serum, and what other use cases are you working on today that may be actually usable for people?
So the way we've been approaching this is we've been implementing a lot of the contracts and doing the auditing for them to give developers kind of really good reference code and starting points to go from. So Serum has built a central limit order book, which is like has never been done before in a layer one. And this is a protocol that anybody can interact with. And there's, I think, a dozen small teams that have kind of took the UIs and kind of forked them and started adding their own features to this. And that's kind of part of the trading ecosystem. And something that we shipped was a Uniswap style implementation of an automatic market maker that's also now running alongside Project Serum. And some really cool things can start happening from the composability of an order book, which is really expensive, important information that a market maker that is like Alameda or Jump is basically putting into the chain, into the state, right? Their order book and their risk tolerance and how they're pricing every asset is now part of the state machine. And it's much more significant than an Oracle price feed from Binance, because this is actually like assets at risk with orders that you can take. And you can now combine this information with an automatic market maker and eliminate some of the issues that you see in Uniswap with, impermanent loss and all these other things that kind of break those systems. And that's kind of like been really exciting for me to see just developers start taking these two protocols and state machines and start like experimenting with this in ways that have not been done on Ethereum and basically impossible on Ethereum. But some of the other use cases, like, so trading is one thing, but like, I think fundamentally, like a lot of these systems are like almost boring, right? Like Audius was just announced today, and taking something like playlists and likes and like NFTs around songs and moving them on Solana isn't like on a technical level, it's not a new financial trading system, but at a broader sense, this is an implementation of copyright law, right? It's software eating copyright law. There's very cool applications that can happen from that, because now if you have an NFT that represents royalties for a song that like an artist posted, that can now be traded in the same protocol that Serum implemented and is now beta tested. Now, like those folks that are using Audius have access to, an exchange built by probably the best team in the world to build exchanges, right? And that kind of composability and like the interplay between those use cases, I think, is something that creates this exponential growth in an ecosystem. So for us, those are like, at the end of the day, I think a lot of these products end up being somewhat financial, but the implications of them are much broader than that. Like one of the use cases we've been focusing on, which is a long kind of enterprise sales one, is 5G deployment. So we did a pilot with Dish where we had a real-time auction of bandwidth between providers and users. So 5G is a very complicated new technology. A phone requires somewhere between 12 to 24 different tower connections that are constantly dynamically updated. You have to maintain the set driving at like 60 miles an hour and guarantee 1 gigabit bandwidth. And the capital costs to provide this hardware are massive. And the opportunity there is if you have a real-time billing system that's based on tokens, if it's fast enough, that phone can dynamically bid for hardware suppliers and bandwidth and kind of get whoever has this hardware right now for whatever use they want. And that's impossible to build with like traditional databases. So that this is even going beyond like what you can't do on Ethereum, which is a legacy, blockchain, to this. You can't even do this in AWS, right? You could, right? You could build these systems with Postgres, but you'd have to effectively rebuild most of what Solana does.
Just so I understand. Sorry, how serious are telcos today, like taking this ability to work?
This is super slow,
right?
Yeah, this is super slow, but this is something that I think like we've been used to at Qualcomm, like talking to these folks, so we kind of understand how long these cycles are. As a startup, we don't. This isn't what we're betting the company on. I think trading, especially trading crypto, is like a real life use case that has a ton of potential for product market fit. And that is a really good jumping off point for, I think, trading everything else within 5 years. I think within 5 years, you'll probably see majority, like a large chunk of trading actually happening in cryptographic, like with tokens versus like equities. I think the shift is going to happen pretty quickly. And you kind of start, I think, was it Bittrex that announced equities trading of US equities? The main bottleneck there isn't the tech. It's kind of like the regulatory, kind of like some company has to figure out how to guarantee settlement. But as soon as this happens, I think you'll see a very fast and rapid movement away from old traditional systems that require paper and documents and all these like old legacy like APIs and a bunch of work to talk to each other, to simple cryptography that can be done by an engineer, you know, over a weekend. So that to me, I think, is coming really quickly.
Yeah.
Sorry, and in that world, do you see does it kind of make sense that it would all happen on one settlement layer? Do you foresee that, or do you think it could happen on multiple settlement layers, as in multiple layer one blockchains?
I think because of regulation, it'll probably happen in like some centralized systems. Yeah. But folks like FTX that are kind of fast movers will kind of move this into the DeFi space as well. And we're excited to work with them because they are moving really fast and are able to kind of move through all this kind of red tape pretty quickly. So to me, this is like, you know, when I think of like what is Solana and like that vision of price discovery, I think we can legitimately compete with like New York Stock Exchange and CME, because at the fundamental kind of technology level, if a state transition in Solana moves as fast as the news around the world, then that price is going to be as accurate as a price in the CME or New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, we've talked a bit about Serum. I'd love to know a bit about the background, as like how you got in touch with Sam and how that all kind of came together. Because obviously, you know,
we talked to them a couple times, and they were looking for a blockchain to do this. And I showed them our demo. I don't know if I can. Can I share my screen and show this demo?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So this has been our sales tool. Let me make sure I can connect to it.
Is this Break Solana?
Yeah. So this is a very, very simple demo. All it shows is that I'm gonna start smashing keys with my hand, and it shows how quick. Let me see. I'm connected to the wrong network. 1 second. The demo gods are never in your favor.
And just so everyone knows, yeah, so this is live on mainnet.
Yeah. So this is live on mainnet. I'm smashing keys, and as you see, the average confirmation time is under a second. And this is me smashing keys live, and the cost to run this was like a couple cents. Yeah. You can go to the Explorer and you can kind of see that this transaction is a smart contract transaction. It's not just some, you know, uncommon path, right? This is the actual path that Serum takes, and it's executed and confirmed. And the speed was basically something that they didn't see anywhere else, and the capacity was large enough and like significantly large enough to where they saw that they can build a central limit order book. And our vision of the fact that like everything that we've designed in our system is based around hardware scaling. It means that like we've provisioned the current network to, you know, capacity of like 50,000 TPS. But we already have folks that are using hardware that was released over the summer that are demonstrating 300,000 TPS on their hardware. So this idea that we grow with Moore's law is a immensely powerful idea, because Moore's law is a doubling function. It's an exponential function. It's very hard for you to know, to kind of to be aware of it, because, you know, 20 years ago I would have sounded crazy to say that there's going to be 1 gigabit internet to the home. I probably sound crazy when I'm telling you that 20 years from now we're going to have 1 terabit internet to the home. Effectively, people are going to have access to 1 terabit of internet. So that's an insane idea, but that is what an exponential function does. So that kind of growth is what's going to effectively allow us to grow to fill whatever the world's capacity. Like, we're not going to be a supply constrained market. It's going to be a demand constrained market. You know, like, as much as demand we can onboard, I think this network can take. So this was something that really kind of sold Sam, and I believe this is something that will continuously be an advantage for us over any other design, because I think the engineers in whatever companies that we talk to get this, because they've seen this. You know, anyone that's been around and programming for the last, decade has seen how fast technology moves, and it's never going to stop.
Yeah, I also love from the marketing perspective that you guys are really honing in on this, and just like, it breaks Solana, like basically just you're continuously showing off how fast you guys are.
I mean, that's so should we? I was actually just kicked out of the webinar somehow. Like, my internet connection broke. They see, like, we still had that. We do. This is a real problem still. The internet today. So thank you so much, Anatoly, for the time. I think we have 15 minutes left roughly for Q&A, and I'm sure, like, our LPs will have some questions. You will have, and that's now to our LPs. You will have at the bottom of your screen, if you look down, there's a Q&A button. And you can submit questions on the Q&A button. And I see first questions coming in actually already. So we have 15 minutes left. Let's just go through one by one and talk through. So first question, is this project focused on the US entirely, or are your ambitions globally? And which role plays actually Asia in your strategy here?
So USDC is a major is like a partner that we just signed in the US, and that is a US focused strategy for payments for financial transfers. But FTX is obviously a company based in Hong Kong. So we are, by definition, crypto's forcing us to be global. I think that's part of the exciting opportunity in crypto, is that the market is the entire world and the entire internet. I can't think of any other product that I would have that kind of exposure. Even if I was building operating systems, they would probably be more focused on the US, but crypto is forcing us to be, to cover the entire world. And I think the growth there is really, like, when COVID hit and the US markets collapsed, our team, because it's distributed and decentralized, didn't skip a beat. Nobody even noticed that we were fully remote. And in terms of adoption and partnerships, we didn't skip a beat, because a lot of the teams we were talking to were already, like, outside of the US. And that's been, I think, like, something surprising to me, how important that is.
That's true. So actually on USDC, that was a good hint. We do have another question on USDC. That's a bit later question. I move that forward. So USDC is now available on Solana. Many people use it to earn money through Celsius, Nexus, etc. What would happen in a scenario in which Ethereum upgrade 2.0 doesn't go through smoothly? And in general, are stablecoins like USDC safe from such network failures? And what would would just not be accessible for a few days? Or, so wait a second at the end, and would it be actually any safer to hold USDC in a Solana wallet as opposed to Ethereum these days?
So I don't want to FUD Ethereum. I don't want to. I don't want to FUD Ethereum. So the way that USDC works is they actually hold the dollars, and they're the final sayer on who gets dollars when they actually convert them to a wire to a bank account. So even a crash in any network will not cause the real money that's held in a bank by Circle to disappear, right? So they're kind of the final arbiter of those funds. So corruption. Yeah, a corruption in the network will make their job, really hard, and will probably, not be fun for anybody involved. But ultimately, they could kind of figure out what the right thing to do, because the only kind of you know, if you think about like a blockchain as a database, the stuff that's in flux are transfers that are moving, right? That are still kind of haven't been settled by not just the chain, but also USDC themselves, their copy of the ledger. So that delta is pretty small, right? It's like, you know, maybe 15 seconds at most. So if you happen to be the unlucky person, that you probably have to do some work to recover those funds. But I think in the grand scheme of things, I think you're pretty safe with stable coins like USDT or USDC.
Yeah. So next question is a bit of a, fair to ask. We had a, like our last call with one of our portfolio projects was with Hashgraph, so it's a fair question. FTX has recently announced Project Serum, and you spoke about that earlier. Why, like, if there are other like high throughput blockchains or distributed ledgers available, why did FTX choose Solana over others?
So this is out of kind of Sam's mouth, is that we are like religious about performance. Like everything about Solana is designed to really scale to this theoretical limit, you know, like not just in terms of throughput, but also latency. You know, everything is designed for Solana state transitions to travel as fast as news through fiber. So yeah. Our goal right now, our blocks are 350 milliseconds. We want to get to 80 millisecond blocks, which is the speed of light through fiber halfway around the world. That would make the system competitive with the New York Stock Exchange. And this is what Sam and FTX and those folks care about. So this is kind of like what we've been designing for and building for. Fundamentally, DAGs are a different beast. Solana is designed for this price discovery, which means we guarantee that all prices are replicated globally within a certain amount of time. DAGs do not. So this is fundamentally, I think, when you look at other designs, you'll see trade-offs that are Pareto efficient. You know, DAGs like Avalanche and Hashgraph have benefits because like full node, they can potentially scale to full nodes that hold less state and provide more security, but I don't think they can work in the censorship resistant price discovery use case as well.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Next question, I just read it out. When our investment gets liquidity end of January and other early investors receive liquidity as well, a lot of token will be added to the market at the same time. How are you preparing for this event? And is this not completely crushing the Solana price? Well, the early investors are comprising of a number of the highest profile funds in the world, right? VC funds, and we are obviously in close touch with them. There's part of them is multi-coin, slow ventures, and so forth. Many of them actually believe in the longer term vision of Solana. So these are not trading funds, right? Like us, we're here for the long run. And so the minute you get liquidity is not the minute you have fulfilled your vision, right? It is still just the starting point of the project.
So so both like Sam through Alameda and Multicoin and a bunch of like foundation and kind of our bigger investors are extremely bullish on the project, because the opportunity is that, you know, we had take something like Binance that does $10 billion of volume a day. That is now, we're on the way to get there with Solana, right? Imagine if Ethereum actually did $10 billion of volume a day, right? In such a way that like it's a program operating system for people to plug in their applications and start to interact with this with this kind of like massive like value creation engine. So this is something that I think will be, you know, like easily bigger than Ethereum. Like in my mind, if you had like the volume that Binance does out in the open for everybody to interact with and code against and build new products, I think this ecosystem will kind of exponentially grow, like way beyond just the value of Binance.
Yeah, in that sense, actually, the way CoinMarketCap calculates the market caps, it will, like, the additional token will just simply push you in the top 10 in the market cap, right? And then it will get even more attention. It's also interesting to see actually that the early investors are literally all staking, right? They're all supporting the network and acting as a validator. So that speaks for itself, I would say. Let me see if there's another question. Okay, one more project. Actually, a good question here. When do you think we will see projects that do Solana what WordPress did to HTML protocol?
I guess I'll try to interpret that question, which is make blockchain kind of usable by normal humans.
yeah. I think it's a good question.
I think this is so WordPress came at a time where we already had Facebook and literally 1 billion people on the internet, and that is like to the point where the human mind can understand what the internet is at a very large scale. I think I think what we're building in the grand vision is not like a blockchain. It's actually like cryptography. Like we're empowering humans to use cryptography, and that is, I think, if my mom can understand that she holds a cryptographic key that has ownership over value, we'll get that. That is like kind of a point where you'll start seeing tools like that kind of make the stuff composable for humans. And I think that's coming really quickly. As an anecdote, my mom asked me about Bitcoin, whether she should invest in it because of the amount of money the federal government is sending her, the US federal government is sending her, which is an 80-year-old woman that lived through the collapse of the Soviet Union, probably has some experiences that are she's seeing repeated again. So that I think
maybe
is like
explain it to my mom as well, because I didn't go through that yet.
Yeah. So I think that that world is coming really soon. I think every boom cycle brings more people in, and more people understand what cryptography actually means. And I think the blockchain part is an implementation of that. And I think we're very well positioned to be the place where we do see 100 million people start interacting and using it. I don't know if you guys saw the Audius announcement today, but this is one of those use cases that I think made the internet in the 90s, was music downloading. And I think there's, probably not the same kind of possibilities today because there are Spotify's of the world now that are accessible. But I think artists and content creators see the space as a way to kind of break their, away from the middlemen that kind of control their industry and bring a lot of new people in, because they do have access to, the wide general public that isn't just crypto centric.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Anatoly, for taking the time. That was really insightful and useful. So let's maybe as a final word, where can people, our LPs and people in general, where's the best place to go to learn about Solana? Is it your website, or is it
Solana.com? Solana.com is a really good place to go, and I highly recommend that you guys folks directly reach out to myself and Raj, the CEO, who I wish could have been here, and just talk to us. I think we're very open. We'll send you our Calendly link, and you can just pick it. You can throw times at us and take your time. Happy to talk to everyone. If you're more technically savvy, we have a Discord group that is fantastic, and you can see how our engineers work and talk to some of the developers building in the ecosystem as well.
I also saw, so you've got your hackathon about to start. Maybe you could just kind of tell us a quick bit about
so I think I always thought that we didn't have to build bridges personally. If we got product market fit in Solana, that people will build the bridge to Ethereum, because these are two good ecosystems, and the folks that that Certus One, they're the ones that built this bridge. So it's been awesome for them to drive it. And we're built this hackathon around the idea that now that we have these two ecosystems that are connected, which applications we can build that can tie the two together even more. So we had over 1,000 registrations, which not to compare to our competitors, but Near had about 300 for their Rainbow Bridge hackathon. So
that was a big one, and that was already a massive one, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, and good night to San Francisco from Hong Kong.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks
you so much.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.